So I was recently at Home Depot, and they were running a sale for the upcoming Christmas holiday, and it was basically a 4 and a 6 amp hour battery with a charger, and you got a tool included in it. I've been looking for a battery powered grinder. We'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, this was a pretty good deal. $200, 2 batteries plus a tool. You can't beat that. The tool, I think, I've seen these range from 175 up to 225. Home Depot sells it for 200, and yeah, it was a sweetheart deal. So one thing I will say, Milwaukee almost got me buying the M18s, but they had basically the same deal with M18 Milwaukee stuff. But yeah, the grinder they were offering was a piece of shit. It was the cheapest one they sell. So yeah, so I just went with DeWalt. Sorry, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So let me go inside. We'll get into a little bit with this guy, and then we'll come back out here and put this thing through its paces. I got some variety of sanding discs, grinding discs, cutting discs, and a finger remover. A little nervous about testing this one. I'm going to throw it out when I'm done with it because I still stand by that you should never use these things. So yeah, let's get into that and come back out here in a little bit. So before we get into the DeWalt, let's talk about what I've been using for, I don't know, the past 15-20 years, and that's this Bosch 1710 grinder. Not a damn thing wrong with this thing. Plenty of power. Never has given me any problem whatsoever. I mean, you can tell that it's been well used. Critiques is the lock for the paddle trigger. You kind of have to fill your finger in there, and to actually lock the trigger, this little small button back here, it's kind of a two-hand operation to get that to work. But aside from that, this thing is giving me no problems. The biggest reason why I'm replacing it is this black appendage that requires wall pixies to make it work. And that is actually what prompted me to make my next purchase, which is the old DeWalt, what is it? DCG405. This, obviously, there's no cord coming out the back, so that's the biggest bonus with it. It is brushless. It's the XR, which means pro grade, I guess. I do like the vents for the motor back here. They're screens. They're not just holes that'll open up, so and they do come off if you need to clean them. That's kind of cool. Keeps the gunk out of the motor somewhat. It does not have the paddle switch on the side. It uses an actual switch, and if I'm being honest, if I would have known this before I bought it, I may have reconsidered buying it. But now that I've used it a little bit, I actually don't mind it that much. My old Bosch, usually when I would use it, I'd lock the trigger anyway, and then I'd do my thing, and occasionally I'd squeeze it a little bit too hard and it would release the lock. So having something that permanently locks is kind of nice. It's still going to take a little for me to get used to, but it's basically, I mean, it does have a momentary aspect to it, but I mean, it locks in and it's good to go, and to release it, you just hit the thing. I kind of wish they would have made it a little bit bigger, so when you're wearing gloves, it'll hold. I mean, it'll be easier to get to, but like I said, that's just kind of nitpicking. The, I guess, arbor lock is up here on the top. It's got this differently designed retainer here. It's actually kind of cool. This doesn't screw in. It just kind of sits in there with an O-ring. And then you got this guy, which adapts to the different size implements you would put on it. So if you have a bigger one, which I don't know if I have a bigger one here. I don't. But if you have a bigger one, that would capture it from the outside. Now, as far as the brake, kind of fiddling here, it has a brake, and apparently it has a kickback protection. So when you're sitting there grinding away at something, if it catches, it'll kick back, and I'm guessing there's some kind of accelerometer in here. It senses a jerking motion and shuts it off and hits the brake, which is a kind of a new safety device to these, and it'll actually engage the brake when you release the trigger. It stops it quickly, whereas to the old style ones, they just kind of wound down, and you had to kind of sit there with it in your hand as it unwound. So what we're going to do is we're going to head out to the van. I got some different grinding wheels that we could try out, flapper, cutoff, grinding, and we'll just kind of go over basic principle of how these should be used, being that the internet is full of people that use these things the wrong way and in a dangerous way, in my opinion. And to wrap it all up, I'll see if I can find a hunk of wood, and we'll give the old finger remover 5000 a try. Very carefully, mind you. Holding this in my hand is just making me nervous. So yeah, I forgot to mention, I rarely ever use it. Instead of having a spanner like the old Bosch did for loosening the grinding disc and whatnot on it, it actually uses a 6mm Allen key, which is kind of cool because we all have these, and if you lose this, you're kind of hooped until, well, unless you have something else to replace it with. But yeah, I kind of like that little feature there. So yeah, let's head back out to the van, and let's get to making some sparks. All right, so before we get started, safety, as always, don't take safety advice from people on the internet. Read your owner's manual and do what they tell you to do. I can tell you one thing: gloves, face shield, which I'm not wearing, at the very least eye protection of some sort. Hearing protection's good. No loose clothing like a hoodie. Like I said, do as I say, not as I do. But yeah, keep that in mind. Like I said, always use your, don't take safety advice for some jerk off in the back of the van, for God's sake. So anyway, we're going to start off with least dangerous, ascending into it. Now with my personal opinion, these flapper discs, they're more of a recent creation, recent being within the last 20 years, I'm guessing. These are a amateur welder's wet dream, because they just make your bad welds go away. I personally like them. They leave a nice finish when you're grinding things down. One thing with these, when you're grinding with these, you want to keep them somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees. Try to use the whole disc so it wears evenly. None of that, actually, honestly. That's just kind of dumb, and you don't want to grind it in too big, because then you'll start screwing up your little arbor there. So let's put the earplugs in and give this guy a quick little scrub down. Alright, so there you go. As you can see, they leave a really nice finish. Like I said, I really like those. On the danger scale, they're probably the lowest as far as that goes. So let's put another disc on these things. I think the next will be the standard old grinding disc here. Alright, well, this is just your typical grinding disc here. These are kind of for more removing a lot of material for when you're a really bad welder, like myself. With these, the only thing you really got to worry about is just kind of even contact with the blade, with the grinding surface. You don't want to take, this is the closest thing to me, I think if you're grinding out a screw, you don't want to just bury the screw into the middle of the disc, because then you'll put a weak spot and there'll be a bump in there, and it could fly apart. Not a good idea. But for these, I mean, as long as you're kind of being smart about it, they work pretty good. Now I'm going to cut it down here. Again, with these, You always want to be mindful of where your sparks are going. Preferably not at you is a good angle to have it on. But again, with these, you go anywhere from 5 degrees, 10 degrees, or you can just kick it up on its end. You're really not going to hurt anything with it. There you go. You can see it removes a fair bit of material fairly quick. So let's go on to the next disc, and I got to get different earplugs because these ones I had were garbage and they're not working very well. They keep pulling out. So another little trick I forgot to mention, when you're changing these discs, of course, take the battery off. This is smart, and as long as you put these on by hand, you can take them off by hand. So hit your lock, get it in the detent there. Just grab the disc and turn it. And as long as you put it on that way, it usually comes off that way, and there's no need to go find your spanner or this little 6mm Allen key. In the meantime, it makes life a lot easier. I mean, I'm sure I'm eliminating all those goofy hex drive tools that they sell, but yeah, put it on by hand. Usually it'll come off by hand, and it does not need to be crazy tight because it self-tightens because it rotates in the opposite direction. Okay, so now we're on to what I would consider the most dangerous wheel. I put that label side up, doesn't matter. That's the cutoff wheel, and the reason why I say it's dangerous is because these things have a tendency to fly apart, mostly because people use them the wrong way. These, if there's any damage, cracks, or chips in them, I just toss them and get a new one. It's not worth risking your face for these. Yeah, like I said, and I've seen people in these short videos, they take chunks out of these so they cut faster. I don't know if that's actually the case, but don't do that. That's just dumb. So, yeah, and the other thing with these, we'll come down here. When you're cutting with these, you'll want to cut straight across like this. Now, you can plunge and cut like that, but if you do that, it wears the blades out quicker, and it honestly doesn't make it cut any faster, from my experience. So what I like to do is I'll grab it in the middle here like this and just run the edge back and forth, and then eventually cut through. Another thing is, once you get into your cut like that, be mindful that you don't want any of this action going on, because that side loads these discs. And I mean, you can see just from me pulling on it there, they're kind of flimsy, to be honest with you. So keep that in mind when you're running them. And yeah, if you're not comfortable with a grinder, I would suggest not using these at all. So let's put my battery in. I'm going to need that. Do that, and let's cut a hole in this thing. So there you go. That made a pretty quick work of that, if I'm being honest. So yeah, let's reconfigure some stuff, and then we'll get on to testing this thing, or checking it out or something. All right, so here's the deal with these things. One, it's a blade without a covering guard. So I mean, yeah, they do use these on chainsaws. It's actually a smaller chain than you would see on a standard chainsaw. One thing you need to know about chainsaws is that the tip of the chainsaw, where the chain wraps around, is dangerous, because when you get that into the wood, it tends to want to kick back. I was at a school 100 years ago for a major chainsaw company getting trained, and he told us a story about a guy in a certain state who bought a chainsaw, didn't know that, and he was cutting above his head, and the chainsaw came down and smacked him in the face and killed him. And according to this person, it would have been more profitable if they didn't sell chainsaws in that state, because of the lawsuit that they had to pay out. So, like I said, I don't like these things. I know some people say, oh, I use them all the time, I don't have a problem. Usually that's the person who gets hurt, because they think they got it all figured out, if I'm being honest. So yeah, I'm just going to do it just to see how sketchy it feels. Another problem with these is they show them as being a what the hell would you call it? They show them as being a like a carving tool, and you always see them going back and forth, and you shouldn't side load these. Chainsaws aren't meant to be side loaded like that, and they're not meant to cut like that. They might do it, but I mean, you got these two pieces of thin sheet metal that are holding this chain in. You bend that, and this thing comes off, or the chain breaks, and if it goes flying, I wouldn't want to be around if that happens. So, like I said, this is definitely do as I say, not as I do type situation. I'm just doing this because I'm kind of curious how sketchy these things are, and I think it'd be entertaining to watch me be a chicken while running this thing. So yeah, let's give this a quick test, and hopefully we don't lose any of our appendages, especially the important one. All right, here we go. Safety squints engaged, and let's see what happens. I'm gonna get on this side of it. There you go. Alright, well, I will say it removes a lot of wood quickly. Kind of makes me think about what it would do to my finger if given the opportunity. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it did such an easy job removing wood. I almost felt myself getting complacent with it that little bit I was using it there. I still don't like these. I will toss this in the garbage once I'm done this video, so I am never tempted to use it. But yeah, I don't like them. Sorry. I know I'm probably being a baby, but yeah, definitely no. So let me get this cleaned up. Probably wasn't a good idea do this in the back of my van because now I got sawdust on the floor. So yeah, we'll get this all cleaned up, and we'll close this out with my final thoughts. So there we go. DeWalt grinder. I approve. I'm sure I'll get used to the switch thing at some point in time. Other than that, I'm not losing any power with this tool, which is kind of what I was worried about by switching to battery powered. And yeah, it works good. I'll hopefully get as many years out of this as I did out of that old Bosch. We went over a couple of different techniques for using the discs that go with the grinder. I did skip what the hell is it called, the wire brushes. I really don't use those too much. They are good. They're good for removing a lot of material fast without damaging the under material. So if you had something that was rusty, the wire brush would be good for just whacking the rust off of it. Me personally, if that was the situation, I would just use a flapper disc. So you do have to be careful with wire brushes. One, the little needles that make up the wire brush, they tend to fly off, and make sure your PP is protected, because you get one of those wire needles into that area, it's uncomfortable, to say the least. I know from experience. And the other thing with wire brushes that kind of make them dangerous is if you got loose clothing on, t-shirt, a hoodie, you get a little too close to yourself, they're good at grabbing you. And I know a guy who lost a tooth playing with one of those. He got a little too close to himself, he grabbed his shirt, the handle came up and smacked him in the side of the face. So that's another thing to keep in mind when using those. But yeah, now we get down to this thing, which I just took out of my grinder, and that shouldn't be there. Yeah, it just kind of falls apart once you take it apart and the clips aren't on it. So again, I don't like these things. They're problems waiting to happen as far as I'm concerned. You can use them if you want, but yeah, they're not for me. And I noticed too on my board I had some nails. That would have been interesting if I would have whacked through that, send that chain flying across my van. Yeah, so that's about it for me. Any questions, concerns, or comments, drop them down in the old section there. As always, be careful when using any power tools, for that matter. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Put the thing back in my grinder. There you go.